All right, welcome back to the Conviction Fiction Podcast, where we trade excuses for accountability and surface level narratives for self work that actually changes lives. I'm your host, Antoine Rivers, and today we're digging into a mindset that creeps into a lot of our journeys, especially for those of us navigating reentry, redemption, and rebuilding after incarceration. Now, we're talking about viewing yourself as a good person, not as a reality, but as a shield, as a defense, as a way to avoid the full truth of who we are and who we still need to become. All right, let's go ahead and get into the work. All right, guys, there's a certain amount of comfort when you view yourself as a good person. Have you ever noticed how quick we are to say, I'm a good person at heart when somebody brings up something we did wrong? Or, I mean, it's almost automatic, like a shield we pull out the moment we feel exposed. And listen, there's nothing wrong with wanting to see yourself in a positive light. Nobody wakes up wanting to be the villain in their own story. But the problem is when you cling too tightly to the identity of being a good person, it becomes a trap. You start using it like a hall pass that exempts you from accountability. And that's what we don't do on the Conviction Fiction podcast. We are purveyors of accountability. And I'm not talking about like the outsiders, the people looking in from the outside, judging your life like they got all the details. I'm talking about us, the justice impacted community. Those of us who have had to rebuild from zero, reinvent ourselves from the inside out, and then face hard truths in dark places with nobody applauding. We love to tell ourselves we're good. I didn't mean no harm right there. I mean, but we do love to tell the story that we're good hearted. Um, a lot of times we use that phrase, I was doing what I had to do. My intentions were good. But ask yourself this: did your intentions match your impact? That's where the discomfort shows up. That's where the conviction fiction message cuts deep because we spend a lot of time talking about identity, specifically the identity we perform versus the identity we're actually living. Let's be real. We keep it real here. A lot of us held on to this good person label while living a lifestyle that wasn't good at all. And I'm not saying that to shame anybody. I'm not saying it because it's uh, a lie. I'm saying it because it's the truth. I had to face it myself. I used to think, man, I looked out for people. I wasn't heartless. I wasn't out there trying to hurt nobody. But when I sat down and really examined my life, especially during those quiet moments inside when the noise died down, I realized I wasn't holding on to some crazy idea. I was running from the reality of myself. Okay. And that's what this episode is about because I am a good person kept me comfortable. It kept me from looking too closely at the damage I caused. It allowed me to keep one foot in the truth and one foot in denial. And the more I leaned on that identity, the less I grew because you can't grow from what you won't acknowledge. And that's the thing about the conviction fiction journey. We don't hide behind highlight reels. We don't pretend the good moments automatically cancel out the bad ones. Okay, so what? You help your mama with the bills. Good. You were there for your kids' birthdays when you could. Good. You took care of your people. No one has a problem with that. But if the other half of your life was wrapped in chaos, danger, manipulation, or criminal thinking, or criminal behavior, then those good moments are just pieces of the puzzle, not the full picture. Now, This podcast always comes back to narrative. That what's the story you're telling yourself and why? What are you protecting? What are you avoiding? What because the truth is people rarely hide behind this good person identity because they're lying. Most of the time, they're scared. Scared of what facing the full truth might demand from them. Scared of accountability. Scared of having to change patterns that have been running their lives for years. But here's a little twist that I want to add here. When you stop trying to defend yourself, you finally give yourself permission to develop yourself. Saying I'm a good person is easy. Becoming a good person consistently, intentionally, humbly, that's the real work. And it starts with telling the whole truth. The part that feels good and the part that doesn't. This is where the story shifts. This is where real growth begins. So I want y'all to think about that. Like not when you claim goodness, but when you actually build goodness, that's what we are trying to do. Now, what this good person thinking really is I just want to break it down really quick for what it really is. And you have to take a moment because you want to think of yourself as a good person. Viewing yourself as a good person sounds harmless until you really sit with it. And on this show, we don't just talk about the surface level work. We dig into the function behind the thinking, the why, the how, the what is this mindset doing for you and what is it doing to others. Here's the truth. Viewing yourself as a good person is often a coping strategy, a survival tool. It's a mental shortcut we learned a long time ago to protect ourselves from guilt, shame, and the hard work of accountability. It's like an emotional bandage. You slap over a wound instead of cleaning it, stitching it, and letting it heal properly. At its core, this thinking means using isolated good deeds to justify or distract from a harmful lifestyle. And if we're being real, you can find this pattern in almost every prison, on almost every yard, in almost every pod. People will tell you the worst things they've done, but they'll immediately follow it with something good they did, as if the two cancel out each other, right? Or they might do it the other way around. Tell you all the good stuff first and then say, oh, yeah, I did that. But, with semantics, you want to say the bad stuff first and then follow it up with the good. I mean, this is what it sounds like. This is what it sounds like. Think about it. I mean, yeah, I was hustling, but I always looked out for my people. Or, yeah, I caught a charge, but I always respected my family. Or, yeah, I was in the streets, but I always helped my kids when I was around. You see it? This is the mental math we do to avoid or evade facing the truth. One thing we talk about a lot on this podcast is the difference between intentions and impact. Intentions are what you meant to do. Impact is what actually happened. That what goes into many of the courtrooms in the United States. Like you can intend to do something, but like at the end of the day, you're going to be sentenced by the impact that it had. You may have intended to provide for your family, but if your actions tore the family structure apart, then the impact caused harm. You may have intended to protect your kids, but if your lifestyle put them in danger emotionally, psychologically, or physically, the impact still caused them harm. So think about that. You're selling dope in order to provide for your family. But when you're selling dope, then what happens is people might try to rob you. People might try to physically harm you or people that are close to you. So the intention, which was I'm just trying to provide for my family, affects the impact which could be somebody come rob me, tie my children up, or do whatever, that doesn't jive with me or what we stand for on this podcast. That's what we're talking about today. So you may have intended to provide for your family, but if your actions toward a family structure apart, the impact calls home. You may have intended to protect your kids, but if your lifestyle put them in danger emotionally, psychologically, or physically, the impact still calls home. You may have intended to be loyal to your friends, but if your behavior contributed to cycles of violence, addiction, or incarceration, the impact did not match the intention. And this is uncomfortable because most of us were not trying to be villains. We weren't setting out to hurt people. But here's the part we avoid: harm doesn't require malicious intent, harm requires impact. And most people in our lives, partners, kids, parents, neighbors, they weren't affected by our intentions. They were affected by our behavior and the impact. This is why this thinking pattern becomes so harmful, because it creates a disconnect, a split between who you believe you are and the reality of how you showed up in the world. And that split keeps you from growing, guys, because instead of facing the harm, apologizing for the harm, making amends for the harm, or changing the patterns that caused the harm, you just point to the one good thing that you did and you hide behind it like a shield. But there's another layer here. And this is something I really want to highlight because it comes up in almost every transformation story shared on this podcast. When you cling too tightly to being a quote unquote good person, you never give yourself permission to evolve into a better person. Because if you're already good, then what do you need to change if you're already good? Why do you need accountability if you're already good? Why do you need healing or growth? Or you see how that works? The identity becomes the excuse. And this thinking doesn't just confuse you, it confuses the people around you. Your partner doesn't know which version of you to trust. Your kids don't know whether to believe your promises. Your community doesn't know whether your change is real or if it's only temporary. And that's only because you're living in contradiction. Claiming goodness while practicing patterns that contradict badness or contradict your goodness isn't a good thing. Now, on this podcast, our journey is all about environment, getting your story, your values, and your actions to line up. We want synergy. And you can't do that if you're still clinging to an identity that doesn't match your behavior. Because the truth is, you're not a bad person, right? No one is like inherently bad, but you're not immune to accountability either. And accountability isn't an attack, it's freedom. When you finally name the whole truth of who you were, you create space to become who you were meant to be. That's the power in stepping out of the good person trap, right? And it happens too often. It happens way too often. But we are going to discuss how to break this pattern. Um, Based on like our platform and what you know that the conviction fiction to be, we've unpacked the trap. Now let's talk about how to break out of it, because our podcast and this platform isn't just about naming the problem. We're about building the solution. We're about giving people the tools to reconstruct their identity brick by brick. And we're going to do that with real transformation, not performative growth. And this whole good person trap is one of the biggest barriers people hit when they're trying to change their life. So let's walk through some steps that I personally leaned on and that I watched countless returning citizens lean on as they rebuilt their lives from the ground up. First, you have to develop a balanced self-image, right? This is one of the hardest steps, and that's why it's first, because it requires you to see yourself fully, not just the flattering part, not just the parts you post, not just the parts you brag about in conversation. A balanced self-image means being able to say, yeah, I was generous, but guess what? I was also reckless. I did some good things, but I've also hurt people. I've had a big heart, but I didn't always act like it. And let me tell you something powerful, really quick. When you can hold both truths at once, you've officially stepped into emotional adulthood. You stepped into emotional maturity. You realize that you are not perfect. We sometimes have those viewing ourselves as a good person mindsets because we want to appear perfect. Most people are emotionally stuck at that level where they only want to see themselves in the best light. And when people in life confronts them with evidence of their harmful behavior, they fold. They get defensive. They completely shut down. Then that's when the excuses come. But having a balanced self-image means you're no longer hiding from your own story. You're owning the whole narrative, not just the cute chapters. And that's what this program is about. If you are feeling the mission, understanding like what we're trying to do when it comes to reentry and justice impacted people. If you know someone that's justice impacted, if you are justice impacted yourself or have family members that are justice impacted, please follow, subscribe, and like the Conviction Fiction podcast, because we're about taking the fiction out of your story and putting the truth back in. You can't build a strong identity on half truths. The second thing I want to talk about when it comes to breaking the pattern is using self disgust the right way. Now, I know that word disgust, it feels harsh, but there's a difference between self disgust and self hate. Okay. When we're talking about self disgust, it is basically an awakening, not a punishment. It's that moment when you look at an old decision or pattern and think to yourself, I don't want to be that version of me again. That feeling is powerful because it motivates you to change. It tells you the old version of you is no longer tolerable. I've had those moments myself. I remember looking at certain choices I've made and thinking, well, that's not who I want my kids to know. That's not who I want to bring back into the world. That discomfort pushed me from the inside to grow. So self-disgust is a compass. Now self-hate is a case. So one directs you towards your higher self, and the other one kind of traps you in your lower self. Now, if you have been listening, you know that we don't shame people. We also don't sugarcoat the truth. Growth comes from honesty, and sometimes honesty stings before it heals. Okay. Now, the third thing, if you want to break this pattern of viewing yourself as a good person, is probably one of the most powerful tools. And this exercise will teach you because it forces clarity. And clarity is something most people avoid because it disrupts the excuses. All right, it's a life balance sheet. It's pretty simple, but it's not easy. You basically create two columns, one with positive actions and one with harmful actions. Simple. Things you do good and things that you've done that causes harm. You want to write everything down. Those uplifting moments, the mistakes, the patterns, the behaviors you hide, the ones you're proud of, and also not forsaking the ones that you regret. And don't try to even out the list. Right? That's one of the things I tried to do when I was making my list. I will try to like, okay, I got 5 positives. Let me make sure I got 5 harmless ones. So I will want the harmful ones to be shorter, right? You don't want to write 3 good things just to feel better about the one harmful thing that you are avoiding. Don't inflate the positive column to make the negative column feel less heavy. This exercise isn't supposed to flatter you. It's supposed to tell the truth. And here's the secret, guys. Here's the secret. Every person I've ever seen break free from their old patterns had a moment where they sat across from themselves honestly and said, okay, this is the full picture. Now, what I'm going to do about it is going to be this. That moment is transformation. And, you know, going into more things that you would do in order to transform is you need to practice full self disclosure. Full self disclosure. Now, this means speaking the truth plainly without the but, the but and without the excuses, without protecting your ego. We sometimes say, hey, I did this good thing, or that's not the same as saying I live this harmful pattern. They're different. Full disclosure doesn't mean broadcasting your mistakes to the world. It means being honest in the spaces that matter. Maybe a journal, maybe a support group, maybe your therapist, maybe your higher power, even yourself. This is how you break the cycle of self-deception. Um, I guess number 5 for me would be you will have to shift justification, right? This is where most people get stuck, but it's also where the growth lives. It's a duality right there. Every time you catch yourself trying to justify something with a good deed, just stop and ask yourself, how can I make this right? Right? How can I repair what I damaged? Right? Those are things that you can ask because justification is powerful. Instead of saying, I've done this, what about how can I show through consistency that I've changed? Because your past and your history is always going to be there. It's going to be, especially for justice impacted people, it's going to be like records, public record, and then it's also going to be in the minds of those people that have been around you or that have supported you, right? So you can't do that. You can't do it with words. You can't do it with good intentions. You have to do it through behavior, and that's what this platform is about. Right? That's what the message of the conviction fiction is about. Stop performing goodness and start practicing it. Because when you break out of the good person trap, you start chasing the image and start trying to build a life. Okay? Now, once you start seeing yourself clearly, you'll start noticing some things. You'll start noticing like a transformation. Because here's the part of conversations where things get real, not heavy, not hopeless, just real. Because when we start talking about seeing ourselves clearly, a lot of people get nervous. There's a inherent fear there, a fear that if they look too closely, they won't like what they see. A fear that if they stop leaning on that quote unquote good person identity, they'll be left exposed. And I get it. I do get it. I get it. Seeing your full self past mistakes, harmful patterns, inconsistencies, and all that, it takes courage. But here's the truth nobody tells you. Seeing yourself clearly is the most powerful act of self respect you will ever do. I'm going to say it again. Seeing yourself clearly, good and bad, is the most powerful act of self respect you will ever do. And honestly, It's truly the beginning of every transformation story that comes, whether it's through this podcast, whether it's through books, whether it's through like live lessons, whether it's someone we interviewed or my own personal story, or the letters that I get from brothers and sisters still inside. The turning point is always the same: a moment of clarity, a moment where the fog lifts, where you stop trying to protect who you were and start committing to who you're becoming. And I know we don't always talk about this openly, but let's go ahead and put it on the table. A lot of us hid behind the good person identity because we were ashamed. We didn't want our kids to know everything. We didn't want our partners to look at it. I didn't want my kids to know that I would rob and take somebody's shit. We didn't want to admit to ourselves how far we drifted from the person that we truly are, or that the person that we are truly trying to become. So we held on to the idea of being good. We hold on to that. Even when our behavior didn't like actually line up. But that version, good, is fragile. It's conditional. It's selective. It couldn't survive the weight of accountability. And that's the thing. Real goodness, real character, real growth, those things come from telling the truth. They only come from telling the truth. All right. So with that being said, I also want to like let you know that, on this show we talk about rewriting your narrative, but you can't rewrite a story. You refuse to read honestly. If you can't make a new story for some story that you don't even um you don't even acknowledge. You can't edit a chapter you won't even recognize that it even exists. So don't try to build a new identity if you're still trying to rescue the old one. Seeing yourself clearly means you stop running from your reflection. You stop negotiating with your past. You stop throwing up excuses like smoke screen. It means you look in the mirror and say, hey, yeah, I caused harm. I've disappointed some people. I've contributed to cycles I never wanted to be a part of. And at the end of the day, I'm ready to grow because I'm capable of change and I'm willing to build a life I can be proud of. That's what clarity does. It sets you free. So let's talk about something else that's real. A lot of people think admitting their harmful actions makes them bad. They think accountability equals self condemnation, but that's not how growth works. Accountability has never been an attack or judgment or anything else. It's accountability is a path, a roadmap, a doorway into a better version of you. Think about it. How many times have you apologized to someone without fully owning what you did? I'm talking about without naming the impact, without acknowledging the hurt. You're basically in damage control. Clarity is different. Clarity is you acknowledging the truth fully, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it humbles you, even when it forces you to rethink who you believe you were. And it isn't about looking back, it's about looking forward. It's about asking yourself, what do I want my life to look like from here? Or better yet, what patterns do I need to break so I don't go back to the old me? Okay. So that's what we want to do, man. So seeing yourself clearly lets you answer those questions honestly, and that honesty becomes your blueprint. Because here's the most important part of this episode and what we try to do on this podcast in general. The moment you stop trying to look good, you give yourself permission to become good. Not good in moments, not good when it's convenient, not good when you're being watched, but good in your character, good in your patterns and your choices and your habits. That kind of goodness can't be faked. It can't be hidden behind excuses or undone by mistakes. It's built intentionally, consistently, and truthfully. Now, I got a couple of questions because before I wrap up this segment or this show, I want to just sit with these. Like, What good actions have you been hiding behind to avoid facing the full truth? Or what would your life look like if your entire identity, not just a highlight reel, reflected your true value? And what would that mean? What would that mean for you to build a life where your goodness is visible, not just claimed? So, do some homework, man. Like write down in your journal, what would it mean to see myself clearly? What without defending myself, like what would my life look like? Write the truth. Write the truth. Now, this has been the Conviction Fiction Podcast where we do real work, have real conversations, and build real lives, one truth at a time. If this episode spoke to you, please, guys, pick up one of the books on Amazon. You can get Turning Forward, No Turning Back, or the original memoir, The Conviction Fiction. Your support keeps this mission alive. Until next time, stop hiding behind the good parts. Start building, start truly start building a life where your whole picture is good. Thanks for joining. See you next time.